of GFG. We are talking today about anxiety and depression. But before we get into it, I'd just like to thank last week's guest and host, Katekile and Mrs. Baloyi, who were talking about building effective study skills and habits. We'd also like to take this opportunity to thank our senior pastor, Pastor Joeline, and our general overseer, Pastor Strike, for giving us this opportunity to speak to you and to engage on this day on the youth service. But as we talk about anxiety and depression, I'm not alone. We have a social worker with us, Miss Eugenia Baloyi. Miss Eugenia Baloyi, welcome to GFG.
Thank you, Nyeleti, for the wonderful welcome. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge and thank our General Overseer, Pastor Strike, and our Senior Pastor for this opportunity to be here with you and for sharing this afternoon with you, GFG. Thank you so much and you're welcome. Now,
Miss Eugenia, why don't you enlighten us? What do you do in the usual course of your day at work?
Okay, as Nyeleti has indicated, I'm a social worker working at the rehabilitation center. It's not just a rehabilitation center, but it's a substance abuse rehabilitation center wherein we treat people who are using different kinds of substances, wherein it's an inpatient treatment center, wherein people are admitted there for a certain period of time of 3 months, and they are treated of their substance abuse because they have been addicted or they have been using it for so long, they can no longer control it, they can no longer live without it, and they try to stop on their own and they fail because there are withdrawals that they have to deal with, which is dangerous, and without any professional help a lot of fatalities can happen. So within the center, in a daily basis where I am based on, I work in a multidisciplinary team wherein a team of professionals like a psychologist, an occupational therapist, nursing staff, and the care workers together with the social workers. We work together in integration of our services to treat these people with their substance use.
Alright, you mentioned that you deal with a number of patients, but I'd like to ask you, from your professional observations, what has been the impact of the COVID-19 lockdown and the pandemic on people?
Okay, generally speaking, I can indicate that lockdown came in unexpected. Nobody planned for it. We were not prepared for it. We didn't know what was it about and everything. So it demanded change from people. And as I speak about change here, I'm not talking about specific people, specific professional or people from authority or anything. I'm talking about change that required everyone else, from children, from crèche up to anyone else you can think, for older people. So this change, it is not a simple thing. It is not a simple task because it requires you to be motivated, to understand your environment, to understand what you're going through in order to normalize the situation that you find yourself in. Because as you can think, since we were born, we have never encountered a pandemic like this. This is very huge. So people had to adjust with their plans, with their goals. Within this confusion, people had to cope with their day-to-day life, even though it is difficult to just cope without even knowing what tomorrow it has for you. So we have seen people losing their job. We have seen the increase in the gender-based violence. We have seen young people who are already prepared. You know, they've passed with their matric with great marks and they have to go to school, and now they are told they have to stay at home and study from home. That is a big change that had to be made. They had to adjust to learning online. They have to have resources to be able to cope with that new changes. We have seen young people who are doing their matric now. They are confused. They don't know what the future holds. They find themselves in distress to say, how then do we do this? How we are left now with 3 months, then what is that we'll do? We find that they have a lot of scope to cover. But yeah, those are the changes that I have seen. And also in my workplace, we have been having a high rate of admission for people who have been using substances because, as you can see, there's been a ban of alcohol and everything. So a lot of people have suffered physical and emotional and health effects with their withdrawals and stuff. So a lot of people have been suffering with their substance use. They were forced to enter into treatment.
Friends, let me not neglect to say, we are online. This means that you can send us your comments and your questions, and we'll be able to answer them as we see and as it is possible. Now, Ms. Baloyi, you talk about clients that you see and that a lot of them have been coming in for substance abuse. But could you tell me, the majority of your clients, what is the reason for their use of substances? What do they normally come in for?
Okay, in general, most of them, the reason they use substances from a younger age would be peer pressure, would be boredom, unable to deal with the stressors, the problem they encounter on a day-to-day environment. So most of them, they've been using because of those mere issues that maybe could have been prevented, something they could have dealt with, and they end up using things like cigarette they introduced by a friend. They use dacha because a friend would tell them, no, if you can use dacha, then now you can be able to pass with your flying colors for meds. Meds, you are going to be good with it. So most of them, they just use substances because they've been introduced to, because someone assured them that it's a good thing to do. So a lot of them, from that time where they started to use, it was because of some pressures that they encountered, and they failed to stop because their bodies learned to tolerate much more as they continue to use, and they ended up being dependent on them. And at the end of the day, they can no longer live without, because as we talk about addiction now, it's no longer about you being in control or you knowing that I will take this at this time, but the body demands that you take it in order to do your day-to-day activities.
We know that change is inevitable, but sometimes we can struggle to cope with change and struggle to adapt with the new environment that comes to us. Now, could you tell us, can an inability to cope lead to anxiety or depression?
Yes, if someone is unable to cope with the living environment or whatever that is happening within their life, they will end up suffering from maybe different mental challenges that maybe they will have. Okay, let me just give an example with young people now who are encountering different challenges due to lockdown. You may find that they are not able to cope with this learning platform, this new learning platform. They don't have enough resources, they don't have enough financial support, they don't have enough family support. Some of them may have maybe a problem with self-confidence. They are unable to express their failures and their problems. So they portray themselves as brave, as coping, as being able in a place where they are supposed to express their vulnerabilities, because now they are having challenges. So within that situation where one has to cope or to deal with a problem and they are unable to deal with, they can develop depression, they can have anxiety attacks, they can have any other mental breakdown that one can think of, because now the mind works well when you are coping and when you have support, when you are surrounded with people you love, when you feel like everything else is normal and you are loved and you are happy.
You raise very good points, but it is often said that young people don't suffer from mental illnesses. You'll hear older people saying, you are young, you shouldn't have problems. What are your problems? Because you should just be focusing on school. So, can young people truly suffer from mental illnesses?
Yes, young people can suffer from mental illness. I can relate it to just a few months old baby. That child can even suffer anxiety or can be anxious. Let's give an example. Here is a newborn or a young child who has few months, and the child has formed an attachment with their mother, the love, the safety, the security that they experience from the mother or the father or anyone around them. So one day you meet a new stranger or someone who is visiting for the first time, and you give them the child to that person. The child will feel discomfort, the child will be scared and start to cry. So all I'm trying to say here is that anxiety and depression doesn't have a certain age or gender. It affects everyone, it cuts across everyone. As long as a person is living and is encountered with stressors, with challenges, with problems, and will have those stressors demands one to cope, and inability to cope can lead to mental problems. So this lockdown that we're talking about, or this mental problem that we're talking about, we cannot say young people are immune to it, because they encounter themselves with now, due to lockdown, they can't do their sports, they can't be with friends, they can't socialize, they can't do as they used to, or they can't do things as they were planned or as they were structured. Now that they are trying to find fits and trying to make sure that they survive, they cope and everything else, they can be in encountering anxiety or anxiousness and also depression symptoms.
Okay, you've now told us that young people can truly suffer from anxiety or depression, but it is often common cause that we use these words anxiety and depression interchangeably. But I understand that from a medical and scientific point of view, there is actually a difference. So could you please tell us, what is anxiety, what is depression, and what is the link between the two?
Okay, let me start with anxiety. Anxiety is the feeling of worry or immediate worry about the environment or the things that are happening now or the things that might happen in the future. Someone become fearful, and it is also seen when someone has a race of thoughts, of negative thoughts. And then we also see that someone is suffering from anxiety because it has some physical symptoms. You can easily tell when someone is having anxiety attacks. We can be able to see someone who is agitated, someone who is suffering from dizziness, someone who is also having nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. You can see maybe an example of someone who is about to enter into an exam room and they are attacked with anxiety. They start to sweat, they start to be disorientated. So that person can be identified by any person closer to them to say this person is not okay, and they can try to help that person to calm down and continue with their normal functioning. And also, so with depression, it's quite different, because with depression it's about the mood. Your mood is affected. You become hopeless, helpless. You become, or you feel like you are worthless. You end up losing energy, the strength. You end up thinking that it's better you die, because you feel like you can't do anything. You are nothing. Like you are not capable of anything. So when you are having depression, the signs there, or the physical sign there we can see, is the person will have difficulty with their concentration, with their focus and memory. Also, the lack of enthusiasm, the things that you used to enjoy doing, the things that you used to have fun with, now you no longer see or find them being pleasurable. And at the end of the day, you start to do things slowly. You start to move slowly in everything that you are doing. And there's also issue of sleeping disturbances. So someone who is a depressed mood, like we can say that the person is not active. The person doesn't have energy to do anything. There are changes that we can see. Their patterns of doing things eventually change, and it calls for concern. So that is the difference. So with anxiety, we can physically see that this person is having a problem, even if we cannot pinpoint what the problem is. But those physical reaction, we can tell that someone calls for help. Then we can assist that person. But with depression, it's quite difficult to tell, because it will require someone whom stays with you like full time, who can be able to tell that, okay, Nyeleti, you used to sleep at 6, but these days up to 12 a.m. you're still up. Nyeleti used to eat, but these days you hardly finish your food. Nyeleti, you see those kind of things. Someone who can track your day-to-day activities, then they can be able to point a problem, even though they cannot say really what the problem is, but it's called for concern. Someone can see that. So that's how different it can be.
Okay, you mentioned how someone can be anxious when going to write a test. Now, that is what I understand a normal feeling of anxiety, that sometimes when I go write a test, maybe I'm feeling a little nervous. But where do you draw the distinction between normal feelings of anxiety and when anxiety actually becomes a disorder that affects your day-to-day functioning?
Okay, for anxiety to be a disorder, it means it has to happen frequently or more often, and then that thing of you having those fears most of the time, even before a bad thing can happen, you normally feel it, that something can happen. So the frequency can tell if it's a disorder or not. But we cannot just rely on the feeling and the experiences. We have to be diagnosed with it. So it's good to check yourself if you have those panics. How often do they happen? when do they happen? After what has happened? Maybe when I encounter a life-threatening situation, maybe when I encounter a new experience or what. So you should be the one who can be able to tell, because sometimes we don't even know if it's an anxiety attack or not. But then you know that there's this feeling, and even if I try to control it, I'm unable. That's when you call for help, and then you can check with the psychologist to check if they can check if it's really a disorder or it's a once-off thing. Because as you indicated, it's a normal feeling. Anyone can feel. As I came into here, I was asking myself, will I be able? You see, that is, it will always be there. But then the ability to control it, to maintain it, and to see if it is something that calls for concern or not, it's very important.
Guys, as you can see, it's important. You shouldn't always dismiss your feelings of anxiety, that it's just the normal feeling. Sometimes when it becomes too repetitive or it happens too frequently, it is a cause for concern, and you should be able to get it checked with a health professional. So what are the different types of anxiety?
Okay, we have several types of anxiety disorders that one can encounter. The first one, which is a panic disorder, that is when someone experiences a recurring panics or in an unexpected times. That's where a person panics about something. Maybe you are in a taxi, you start just to panic, or when the taxi is moving so fast, you get to be scared and you fear for your life, even though everyone else is calm and everyone is just focused, but you just feel that no, something is not right, and then you panic. And then the second one will be phobia. We have different kind of phobias. We have the phobia of someone who is scared to be in an elevator. We have a different kind of them, but now I'll just generalize to say phobia is an excessive fear of a specific object, a specific event, or other kind of activity that maybe one is fearful to do. And then the next one will be social anxiety disorder. This social anxiety is when someone is scared to maybe participate in a social event or in a place where that person will be judged by other people after they've experienced or they've heard what that person says. So we see this person trying to hide by all means their feelings. They don't want to be seen that they are available because they fear to be engaged or anything. So even with the social events, some of them, they call themselves let's say introvert, someone who just wants to be in the house. But some people, they are not just introverts, maybe they are just having that disorder, but if it's not diagnosed, then we cannot say someone has it. But then we can say that someone is feared to be in the social, to do or be in a place where other people are socializing. And also we have obsessive compulsive disorder. This is seen by someone maybe who is obsessed of doing something, someone who just keeps on doing it and obsessed. But to say that is a disorder, this person has to be compelled. You feel like there's something that is pushing you to do it. So at the end of the day, you always do it. Like maybe because now there's a pandemic, we can say we have to wash our hands. But before a pandemic, you find that this person always, they feel like they have got germs in their hands. Every 2-3 minutes the person is washing their hands. Every 2-3 minutes they feel like they are dirty. Even after washing, they will go back and wash again. So that person, we can say, has obsessive compulsive. They are obsessed with washing their hands, and they feel compelled because they feel like they are in danger. So that's one of the anxiety disorder that we can see. And the other one would be separation anxiety disorder. This one is when someone is scared or is fearful to leave home or to leave their loved ones. This person will find themselves in a place where they feel safe, they feel secured. They're even scared to explore other things because they are scared of what can happen out there. Will I be safe? Will I have someone who will be able to understand me, to care for me? So most of the time, they are at their comfort zone. They are in a place where they know for sure that here I am safe and I am surrounded by people who loves me. And then the other one is illness anxiety. This person is having fear for their health. Like this person is, sometimes they even have symptoms of a certain illness, even when the illness is not there, because they are so scared about sicknesses. Let's give an example with COVID now. That is what is happening at the present moment. This person will start to have those symptoms of COVID, even if the person is not having the COVID. When they taste negative, but they start to experience it, or they in their mind they feel like they have those symptoms. So The last one will be what we call PTSD. Most of the time we call it PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. This happens after you have experienced a certain type of trauma in the past, and then at the end of the day you suffer from the post-traumatic stress disorder, wherein anything related to what has happened or that incident keeps on recurring in your mind. It happens like it's fresh, like it happened right now and right here. So if it was an accident, someone would be even scared to take in a taxi or to use a transport or to use the road that the accident has happened. Like someone will just cringe and stop and can't function after that. So it's what we call post-traumatic. So it can be any traumatic experience that one has encountered, not specifically accident, but any traumatic experience that we had, but you feel like you cannot move on with your life with that because it always comes in to haunt you. So it's something that needs attention of the professionals that are working on that.
You've now mentioned the different types of anxiety disorders that there are. But you also mentioned a few symptoms along the way as you spoke. But just to narrow it down and provide good focus, what are some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety, and what are the signs and symptoms of depression?
Okay. Let me start with the symptoms of anxiety attacks, because most of the time that's when you know that maybe you have anxiety because of those symptoms of attack. Firstly, one will feel dizzy and have shortness of breath, having dry mouth and starting to sweat, being distressed and having hot flashes, and also issue of being worried and having that fear that something bad is happening or will happen, and the issue of numbness. That is when you know that now you are under an anxiety attack. Also, the symptoms of the disorder itself will cover irritability. When someone is not okay, they will be irritated by small things, little things, and also issues of sleeplessness and feeling of fear. Anyway, anxiety is mostly about fear and the worry. So with having those excessive fear and worry and feeling of isolation, being on your own, alone, they can be a symptoms of anxiety disorder. Whereas on the other hand, with depression, I've already touched on some of them even before, but now I will go in detail into each one of them. So here I have a list of 10 symptoms of depression. So the first one, it's the feeling of helplessness and hopelessness. That is when someone feels like nothing is worth it anymore. There's no hope for the future. 2020 is almost finished and I have not reached half of my goals. I have not reached my plans, and my education now is somehow, I don't know the shape or it is taking now. I'm not sure if I will be able to make it this year or not. So you start to be hopeless. You start to act negatively upon whatever that we had planned for. And the second one would be a loss of interest on your daily activities, on your hobbies. You find that this person now does no longer have pleasure or find pleasure in what they used to do. Say example, sports. You used to enjoy playing netball. With the fact that you're not even practicing, you're no longer playing, and then you feel like you lose interest in it. You just even try to figure out, what else can I do, what will I do. Meanwhile, this is what you used to do, this is what you love to do. So you lose interest in those social activities. And the third one will be the loss of appetite, or the weight changes. You find that this person does no longer eat or eat in small amounts, and at the end of the day, the weight changes is abnormal. Abnormal can be in a form of you lose it or you gain it. So because it depends on which part of eating do. You don't eat, then you have maybe eating disorders. We have anorexia nervosa and bulimia nervosa, and that is when the other one, someone eats a lot, and to an extent wherein you hide food from under your bed, you hide chocolates, you hide everything else after eating. You make sure even the family doesn't see that you are overeating, because now it becomes a disorder. So for the other one, anorexia is when you deny your body food, because you feel like you need to have this particular shape and you need to maintain this habit of having this kind of a body. So there are a lot of disorders that comes in within all these things. And then the next one will be sleeping changes. I indicated earlier that someone will not have sleep. You'll have insomnia. Maybe you'll have to have a good sleep for 2 hours. After 2 hours you are awake, or unable to sleep at all, which can even cause fatigue because the body gets tired, the body needs rest. It is within our nature as human beings to have a particular hours to sleep, but as you are suffering from depression, you will find out that no, this is a call for concern. I am unable to sleep at all even if I try, and that is when some people will even try to find alternatives to sleep, like sleeping tablets. And also number 5, it's the issue of anger and irritability. Someone, maybe one of the symptoms of depression, it's getting angry so fast, being aggressive, being irritated by simple things that in the beginning or earlier you will be rational about. You will think through it before you can even react, but now you end up being irritated and you lose it, even with your family, with your parents. It doesn't matter who you are talking to, but at the end of the day, this behavior is worrisome to other people. And then number 6, it talks about loss of energy. You get tired, like I indicated, the issue of fatigue, the physical, you are physically drained, you feel like everything is heavy, you are exhausted, you no longer have that energy to do things that you are supposed to do or you are expected to do. And then the 7th one, it's talking about issues of feeling worthlessness. You don't see worth in yourself, you become harsh on yourself, the way you perceive yourself, the way you see yourself as a failure, even though you have been succeeding very well, you have been progressing very well with everything else, your studies, your relationship life, and your sports life, but at this moment you feel like you are nothing, you are just a failure. So that persistent feeling, it's one of the symptoms of depression. And also number 8, it talks about starting with your reckless behavior that calls for concern. I can give an example from a professional background now. That will be when you start to use substances, different kind of substances, to cope. Then now you are starting to gamble, you are starting to do all kind of reckless behavior that you can think of. That is a call for concern, even for your family and for your life coaches, for your educators, for everyone else that have been with you throughout. They can be able to identify, or now you have started something we cannot even understand. And then number 9, it's a concentration problem. It becomes a problem for one to focus or to make right decision or to remember things that maybe has been happening or that is happening in their life. So it calls for concern for someone who has been so focused about life and whom we thought is coping. But at the moment now, this person cannot concentrate even on the task at hand. They miss up their deadlines. You cannot submit their assignment on time. Some they don't even write it. Some they don't even cope with the scope because maybe they feel like it's too much. The teachers are not here for us. Now I have to do it on my own. I'm unable to structure even my time to say, this time I will do this time. I don't honor my plans at this time. And also, the last one talks about unexplained pains. You now start to feel the physical pain, and the head aches, the back pains, and the muscle aches. So those are the symptoms of depression. So if you can check with the two, the difference is now with depression, it's not easy to pick it up. If you are not closer to me, you can't even pick it up, like I indicated even before as I was clarifying what they both mean. So with depression, it's more severe, it's more personal of what you think about yourself.
We've been interacting with some of our GFG by use of Google Forms, Instagram stories, and Twitter. So GFG, if you come across a tweet of one of your own, please interact. We're using this to provide content that is tailor-made for you. But now we have a question from one of our followers on Facebook. They're asking, what can you do to alleviate anxiety?
Okay. For one to alleviate or to prevent anxiety, one must be able to be honest with how they feel to the people they are with, and also to be able to identify their stressors and their stresses, and also they have to be able to improve their self-esteem. What you think about yourself, it's more important, and what to do when you encounter a problem, it's also important, because you will be able to deal with whatever you know that you are facing. But if you can't even identify what the problem is at the moment, you are just scared, you are just anxious, and then from nowhere, then it is not easy for one to assist you. So for one to prevent it, one must be able to have regular exercises, seek for help when you feel like now it is too much, and also it helps to spend time with family. It helps to be in touch with the loved ones, your friends. And I understand because of lockdown you can't just meet, but it is important to have those phone calls, to have those video calls, to have those now we use Microsoft Teams even at work. We something that is new to us, we didn't know about, but now we can even have meetings. So why not, if as a team of friends, why can't you just do those social meeting like online? You talk like you used to sit like in a restaurant where you would meet and sit. So you can still use those platforms to can make sure that you keep in touch, and also to have a good sleep and have a good diet, and also to make sure that you don't make decisions while you are low in your mood. So that's how you can prevent the anxiousness and the depression in your life. So you just have to make sure you look after yourself and you don't self-medicate those feelings as you feel them. Don't even try to use any alcohol or any substances to deal with them. So just be vulnerable to the people who love you as much as you can. Don't try to hide. That's all I can say.
As she says, guys, please don't sit in isolation and experience all these feelings of anxiety and depression. Reach out to the people around you, communicate, try to speak to your friends regularly, have a good habit, exercise, get good sleep. All these things are very important in taking care of your mental health. Now, what are the behavioral patterns that we can try to be aware of for ourselves in order to prevent ourselves from depression and anxiety?
Okay, the previous question, I think it is more or less related to what you are asking now. The issue of making sure that you are healthy, you are okay, and you are able to express yourself and talk to people. So the good behavior will be to be as real as you can, and to be as open as you can. So that's the kind of the behavior maybe that you should always stick to it, and be as original as you can. Don't try to be someone you are not. Don't try to portray yourself as coping, because we see other people who are trying to present themselves as coping because their peers are presenting themselves as coping. So it's okay for one to cry, I mean talking about their true feelings. So it's okay for one to be vulnerable. It's okay for one to share their honest feelings so that they can be able to get help, you know. So that is what I can say about the behavioral pattern. You need to check on the changes, track your own changes as a person. Be able to evaluate yourself as a person, to say, I used to live like this, I used to cope when it's like this, I used to do this and this and this before COVID. Even now that there is lockdown, now that is this and this and this, these are the changes that I have made so far with my life. This is what I'm excelling in, this is what I'm lacking, this is what I need help on. You should be able to tell what is within my control and what is outside my control, so that you can be able to progress very nicely.
Okay. Another one of our questions from our Facebook followers is it possible that a person can have a mental disorder and not be aware of it? What can one do in order to identify and early so the disorder and how to deal with it?
Okay, it is very possible to have a mental disorder without you being aware. Remember, one speaker said, we are all having mental problems. It just differs in terms of the level of illness that we are, because it takes a special eye to see or to identify a mental problem in a person. So we all, one can have the mental problem without even realizing. What one can see is just to check on themselves. What are the changes? What if you know yourself? What is it that you are good at? What are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? What are your ways of coping with stresses and everything? You are able to check when something is not right. Firstly, you should be the one who will identify the wrong in yourself, because at some point we express ourselves differently to people. Like, let me give an example. When someone has a problem, they act funny to other people. But if you don't know that this is a cry out for help, like a parent should be able to tell if this is a cry out for help or this is just a stage of development to this child. So whatever that you may be presenting or portraying to people will really tell if you have a problem or not. And also, if you feel like whatever that you are doing, it's worrisome, you are also worried about what you do as a person, you are unable to control, I try by all means not to overreact. I try by all means to be within my lane as I speak to my parents, but I fail. There is this edge, like I try, but I cannot control my temper. I think it's about time. That's when you can talk about seeking for help or talking to a professional. We are here, I'm here. You can even talk to the parents and find a professional help. But one thing I can tell is you are mostly the right person also to identify if something is not right. So there is a possibility that you have a mental problem but you don't know about. So, but it can only be confirmed through a diagnosis. Without a diagnosis, it's not, even if I can see some symptoms, I am not within my right to say you are suffering from this and this. I can see a child being active, being hyper, and I know these are the signs of ADHD, attention deficiency, hyperactivity. But I cannot just tell the parent to say, hey mama, your child has got ADHD. Do you understand? But then we can even just to try to tell Ori, why is he behaving like this? What is the problem? And if the parents say, no, I don't know, we can just recommend to say, maybe you can see a psychologist and let's check what is wrong with the child. Maybe they might have any other challenges, you see. So we can't just say, yes, one has a problem without diagnosis. So the person who identified some changes, uncomfortable things that are happening around them, that is when one can say, no, now I need help, now I need to see a professional. And then through the help of the parents, one can, and people should not feel like having a mental problem now it means they are crazy. There are different kinds of mental problems that are just normal, that you can just function with them as a normal person. That doesn't even call for concern. That is why I'm saying people shouldn't be scared to attend to their psychological problem because they fear of stigma, because most of the time we stigmatize each other. So there are different types, like issues like schizophrenia, psychosis. Maybe those are the ones that maybe one can be scared of the stigma and everything. But I feel like we are living in a world where now we learn to accept and we learn more about these sicknesses, like that more than before. Now we are so open, we can read about these things and understand them, and we're able to accept one another. So this person can also find a way to check if I'm fine, if I'm not. Can I ask my family, am I acting strangely lately? I just feel like I'm not okay. So they will evaluate you and they will check them. Yes, you can be able to find help.
We're living in a new age, friends. These stigmas that often are there about mental health are based on lack of information. It is okay to admit to yourself and go to a doctor and be diagnosed with a mental illness, as Ms. Baloyi just told us. It's possible for you to live with it and continue living just like everyone else. It's up to yourself to take it upon yourself to go and seek help.